Saving everyone, wanting no one to die or get hurt, needless to say is a naive ideal. That is the ideal of our main character Shiro Emiya, and in the adaptation Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, that ideal is brought into question. Unlimited Blade Works is an adaptation of the second route in the visual novel Fate Stay Night and follows the events of the Holy Grail War, a battle royale in which 7 servants and masters vie for the Holy Grail, a wish-granting vessel. This sounds like a relatively simple concept and a pretty straightforward story, but it's really anything but that, as beneath the surface, the Holy Grail War is far more dark and complex. It questions human existence, shows us how our ideals can turn us into monsters, and most importantly, that some of the heroes written of in myth aren't all they're made out to be. Saber. The story follows Shiro Emiya, a teenager who was saved 10 years ago from a fire that took out half the city. The man who saved him adopted him, but died shortly after, leaving his regrets of having his dream of becoming a hero unfulfilled with his adopted son, Shiro, who promised to fulfill them and has since devoted his life to this. He's thrown into this Holy Grail War for the first time, knowing nothing about masters and servants, but it's not like he's totally clueless like most protagonists in this situation. He does have prior knowledge of magic and how it works, even if he only uses it to fix things. This being an adaptation of the second route of the Fate visual novel means that details that were presented in the previous route are either left out here or just briefly gone over. That being said, this adaptation may leave some viewers, especially those with no prior knowledge of the source material, very confused. Fortunately, there are scenes where concepts and important information about certain characters are explained, some of which are only summarized. Not to mention the first episode is an adaptation of the prologue section of the visual novel, which introduces Rin and Archer's characters to us. It's a very well executed episode, being 40-some minutes long, showing us everything from her perspective. I much prefer this approach since people who are newcomers to the Fate universe will have at least some basic idea of what's going on. It doesn't just start after Rin's failed summoning of Archer, much like the original Fate anime did. Plot points about characters which are only mentioned in passing in the visual novel are given more attention here, even in one case dedicating half an episode to it. This, as well as a few scenes specific to the anime, help to give it its own identity, and help flesh out the Unlimited Blade Works plotline even more. The show uses the time it's given wisely. It doesn't spend too long going over expository dialogue. It gives you just enough, and the same could be said for how it handles the fight scenes, none of which felt to be too drawn out or too short. Just like the visual novel, the introductory portion goes over what the Holy Grail War is and introduces the important characters, giving us a feel for who they are. The middle is the introduction of at least one of our main antagonists. Shiro's goal is made clear, and there's a massive build-up towards the climax, while the end is where the true villain is revealed, as well as his plan to destroy the world using the Holy Grail. Honestly, I felt as if the way they adapted the story was handled near perfectly. I really couldn't have asked for anything better. One thing I can say about Shiro is he isn't just your generic main character. He's not incredibly overpowered and always comes out on top. If anything, he's probably the weakest character in terms of his abilities. However, no matter how weak he is, every time he's knocked down, he gets back up again. He trains to become stronger in battle and takes advantage of what little he can do, focusing on honing that skill to near perfection. I believe the anime did a decent job of portraying this, even if some of the finer details were left out. What do I mean by this? Well, this goes into another small complaint I have with this series. A prime example of what I'm talking about is in the episode where Shiro fends off Kazuki, using his projection ability to recreate Archer's swords. In the visual novel, he describes that when he projected those swords, it felt as if his arms were about to rip off. Herein lies my problem, however small it may be. You aren't in Shiro's head in the anime like you are in the visual novel, so you don't even know exactly how he's feeling about something. The only way we would know something like that is by some sort of visual representation. Sure, the anime shows him feeling some pain or strain on his body, but we don't get the kind of vivid detail that we would get from the visual novel in this anime. I'm not saying the anime should tell us every little thing Shiro is feeling or thinking, but they could have had at least a few scenes where he's thinking over something. This was done with Kiritsugu in Fate Zero, so I don't see why it couldn't have been done here. Again, however, this is a very minor complaint. Another character that does deserve some brief mention is Rin Tosuka. She plays a very major role in this series by introducing Emiya to the Holy Grail War and essentially mentoring him. In the adaptation of this route, however, Rin is the main heroine, and in my opinion, she plays that role very well. Not only is she responsible for saving Shiro's life, but without her, Shiro might as well be a dead man. The most notable of Rin's personality traits is that she's a tsundere. She has a very short temper, a lot of pride, but she's also very caring and kind. Most of her tsundere attitude is just a front to hide the fact that she's actually a very nice person and can't stand to see others suffer. A complaint I've seen a few times is that she just comes off as a typical tsundere here, which I would have to completely disagree with. I've noticed that typically most tsunderes are pretty irrational and get angry at people for fairly ridiculous reasons. Rin isn't like that, however. If you don't know something or show some sort of incompetence, she will scold you and get angry with you. But at least the reason why she's upset with you in the first place isn't something stupid like you saw her naked. Rin shows an immense amount of development throughout the series, and you can tell that as it goes on, she warms up to Shiro and they actually have some chemistry with each other. The most notable of which is the very last episode in the series, the epilogue. I won't mention anything because of spoilers, but I will just say you can tell the both of them have come a very long way in their relationship in that episode, and have a better understanding of one another. Of course, even though Saber isn't the main heroine here, she still gets quite a bit of screen time, and a few plot points about her are revealed that weren't originally discussed in Unlimited Blade Works, but added in from the Fate route so that people would have a slightly better understanding of her and how her ideals are very similar to Shiro's. Even the villains in this anime, one in particular, have their backstory explained, having them come off as more sympathetic than evil. Gilgamesh, however, is just evil. An evil, greedy bastard. What else is there to say about the presentation of this anime other than it's incredibly gorgeous? Ufotable uses a wide variety of bright and vivid colors for the background, as well as dark and gloomy ones when necessary, which really lends the proper feel and mood to a scene. The fights are without a doubt the highlight, and where the animation truly shines. I would even argue that they're much better looking than the ones from Fate Zero. That being said, there's also a huge reliance on CG in certain scenes, like whenever Lancer uses the gay bulk for the first time. But it's painfully obvious when some of the people walking in the background are CG because the way they walk looks so awkward. Fortunately, it's not very prevalent. The most noticeable scene the CG is used in is probably when the Unlimited Blade Works reality marble is used. Specifically whenever the camera pans out and shows the entirety of the landscape is when it looks the most ugly. But whenever the camera isn't focusing on that, it isn't really much of an eyesore. This is really just a small little nitpick if anything, as I think most of the CG used lends to a scene more than it takes away from it, so I can really only think of this one instance where it's noticeable. I like just about all the opening and ending themes for this anime, with the one exception being Calafina's Ring Your Bell. The song didn't impress me like her other stuff did, it felt very underwhelming. That being said, however, my favorite of these openings is without a doubt Aimer's Brave Shine. I can't count the number of times I've had this song on repeat. She's probably one of my new favorite Japanese artists. I just love her voice. I'd honestly go as far as to say the second opening is one of the best openings I've seen in a while. It really gets you hyped for what's going to happen in the series. One of the insert songs at the end of episode 12, Lisa's version of This Illusion, is now probably my favorite version of that song. As soon as it's played in the episode, I couldn't describe how excited I became. It was great fan service for those familiar with the visual novel's original opening. Hideyuki Fukusawa, the original composer for the visual novel soundtrack, also composed the music for this series. Most of the background music is very good and fitting for their respective scenes. The standout tracks being Archer, Souls to Fight, Far Away From You, and the Emiya theme. Calafina was the composer for the Fate Zero soundtrack, and while I do enjoy Calafina's music, if you listen to it enough, a lot of it begins to sound fairly repetitive. So it was nice to get a break from hearing her music in the background. So after almost 10 years of waiting, we finally have a proper adaptation to the Fate visual novel. The main question on everyone's mind, I'm sure, is was it worth the wait? Well, in my humble opinion, yes. Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works is everything we could have asked for and more. Studio Ufotable has not failed to deliver once again with their adaptation of something from the Nasu-verse. If this anime becomes as popular as I hope it will, I'm hoping Ufotable will tackle some of Nasu's other works as well, most of all Tsukihime. So what's my verdict on this series? Usually, I don't give scores when I do reviews, but I was thinking of adopting this so people will have an idea of what I thought of something as a whole. Taking that into consideration, I give Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works a 9 out of 10. It's a fantastic series and follows the visual novel pretty religiously with some notable exceptions, and even adds some of its own original content. I hope you all enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time for my review of Heaven's Feel, whenever they decide to release that.